This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and you can see the title on your screen. Cheating wife gets served with divorce while at AP's apartment. And she says, "Oh my God, this wasn't supposed to happen. I love my husband." Well, you should have thought about that before you went off and cheated. Now let's get into this story and see what it's all about. He starts off and he says, "During the holiday season of 21, I discovered my wife, who I'll call Kathy, was cheating on me with her high school boyfriend and first love, who I'll call AP. I found out by stumbling upon one of her social media accounts while checking something on her iPad. She didn't use it much, and lucky for me, she never signed out the last time she did. There I found messages, hundreds of them, between Kathy and AP that dated back to mid-October when they ran into each other at Aldi. As background, she and this guy started dating when they were both in ninth grade and remained an item right through the summer after they graduated. That fall, at Kathy's suggestion, they mutually agreed to take a break, as Kathy was going off to college and he was moving to Florida to find work. The break was supposed to be a temporary one, and they planned to eventually reunite someday. So it sounds like this Kathy was thinking, I'm going to go off to college and maybe I'll meet a better guy there. And if I don't, I can always fall back to this guy. Their break became permanent, however, when later that year, AP got a woman pregnant in Florida. He went on to marry the woman and they had additional children. This was crushing for Kathy because she's the one who suggested the break, but didn't intend for things to end between them. Their breakup is what eventually brought she and I together. We were introduced at a party, started talking, and developed a friendship. At the time, I was completely focused on getting my education and did my best to avoid women, alcohol, and other distractions. Well, that's smart. As a result, our relationship developed slowly, with Kathy being the persistent one who eventually won me over. By the beginning of our senior year, we were dating exclusively. But she understood my studies came first, so we only saw each other 2 or 3 nights a week. After graduation, we both got jobs and continued dating. After 2 years of working and living on our own, Kathy and I eventually moved in together, which eventually led to us getting married a few years after that. So this guy didn't rush things, as you can see. He was with her like 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer than that. If you asked me before all this happened, I'd tell you everything was great between us. We got along well, rarely argued, and generally liked the same things. I was completely in love with Kathy and planned to spend the rest of my life with her. Those feelings completely vanished after I saw their messages. Reading them was like an out-of-body experience and not in a good way. I thought, how could I trust anyone if the person I trusted most betrayed me? That's a good question. After their chance meeting at the grocery store, Kathy started messaging AP, and it took him a few days to respond. When he did, she asked him to coffee, and they met up a week or so after that. After that meeting, they messaged back and forth multiple times, with Kathy initiating all the conversations. She was telling him things like, "Seeing you brought back such good memories," and "Wow, I can't believe you look just as good as you did back then." Judging from their early messages, it seemed he initially thought they were just catching up as old friends, but it was obvious she had something more planned from the start. Kathy took things to the next level when in one of the messages she asked to see his apartment. He seemed a little reluctant at first, saying it was a mess, but she convinced him, saying she wouldn't be judgmental. Yeah, she didn't care what it looked like inside, she just wanted to get in there. Kathy dropped by for a visit a few days later on her lunch break, and that's when they reignited things. I know this because they sent each other explicit messages after saying how great it was. Oh boy. Now we're at a point in this story where I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button. That will help out the channel tremendously and also help get this video seen by people all over the world. Now let's go on with this story. For background, after divorcing his wife in Florida, AP moved to the metro area where Kathy and I lived, and the apartment he ended up renting wasn't far from our house and close by Kathy's office. Was that just by chance? Or did he purposely move up there with the intention of getting back with his Kathy? Who knows? All their meetups occurred at his apartment, mostly during her lunch break. However, she did sneak off to see him 3 times on the weekend, claiming she was running errands. You see how much planning goes into cheating? As I'm describing this, it might sound like I handled things with the coolness of the Pink Panther, but I can assure you that wasn't the case. I was teetering on the breaking point back then and still have nightmares about it. One thing I can say is Kathy never once disparaged me, nor did the AP, at least not in their messages. Look, guy, you're kidding yourself there. They were definitely disparaging you just by the fact that they were together. And I guarantee when they were alone with each other, you were getting talked about and not in a good way. In fact, she talked about what a great father I am, how successful I was, and how she put it, she loved me to death. It was kind of like she was rubbing it in his face. Well, she probably was, because if you remember, he's the one that really kind of broke things off with her when he got that other woman pregnant. So she's probably thinking, well, I'll show him. I got a better man. I got a guy that makes more money. He's a great father and all this stuff. And it's kind of her way of getting back at him. On the meetup they had the Friday before Thanksgiving, Kathy told him she wanted to devote herself to her family during the holiday season and they could pick things back after the new year. So I think he meant pick things back up after the new year. For background, we have 2 adult children and recently welcomed our first grandchild. So this is a grandma doing this. This wasn't a problem for the AP as he planned on spending December and January in Florida visiting with his adult children and grandchildren. So in December, the messages between them completely stopped. I stumbled upon their messages when I was using her iPad to check prices on a last-minute gift I was going to buy her. After seeing their messages, I never made that purchase. By the time I found out, they hadn't seen or messaged for nearly 3 weeks. While my emotions were all over the board, I blocked the affair out of my mind and enjoyed the holidays with my family, planning to address things after the new year. My daughter, son, his wife, and my new grandbaby were staying at our house at the time, and I didn't want to ruin Christmas for them. Having the family around took my mind off things and really helped me get through those times. It also gave cover for Kathy and I abstaining from intimacy, since we had a house full of people with few opportunities for alone time. After the holidays, I was hoping Kathy wouldn't reach out to the AP again and even considered letting things go if she didn't. So it sounds like he was planning on rug sweeping this if she didn't follow back up with him, which that's something that you never do. He says, unfortunately, she started messaging him again right after the kids left on New Year's night, so she couldn't wait. He responded the following day, and they set a date for their next get-together at his place. At the time, he was still in Florida visiting his kids and wouldn't be back in town for another 2 weeks. This convinced me of what I needed to do, so the very next day I went to see an attorney and told her I wanted to move forward with divorce ASAP. I let her know that my wife was planning on seeing her lover again in 2 weeks, and I wanted her served at his place. I remember the attorney telling me, whoa, slow down, cowboy, tell me what's going on. I gave her the backstory, and she tried convincing me to slow down a bit and not act so hastily. I told the attorney I didn't want to do that, and if she wasn't willing to draft the paperwork for me, I'd find another attorney. Long story short, she put together a basic divorce agreement in time to serve her when they next met. Leading up to that, my wife was very loving and amorous and was very persistent in trying to get me to make love to her. I didn't want to and rebuffed her a couple of times with various excuses, but one day I came home and she greeted me at the door unclothed. She told me she wanted me right there and then and said she wasn't going to let me do anything else until I did. So against my better judgment, I gave in and decided to give it to her real good. That was a big mistake because, you know what, this woman could have had an STD. You don't know. And second, she's been sleeping with this guy. Why would you even want to go near her after that? We shared 2 additional evenings like that, including the night before she met up again with her AP. On that last night, I knew it would likely be our final time together, so I made sure to get the most out of it and made it a memorable night for both of us. Deep inside, I was hoping that maybe she would message him to cancel their meetup and end the affair, but she didn't do that. Instead, she reached out to him the following morning with all the giddiness of a teenager. This deeply saddened me, but made clear I was doing the right thing. The day came and Kathy was served with divorce papers while she was getting back in her car outside his apartment. So she was probably on cloud nine. She just was with her lover. She felt like she got away with it. And then here comes the server and says, "Surprise!" I wasn't there, but my attorney called and told me the deed was done. While relieved, I got a knot in my stomach knowing the worst was still ahead of me. The day before, I rented an Airbnb for 3 months from a retired couple who spend their winters down south. So that morning, while my wife was at work, I moved my clothes and a few personal things over there. I told my boss what was happening, and we had a great conversation. He was fully understanding and supportive as he had gone through a painful divorce 6 years earlier. His only advice to me was to take my time and think everything through. Within an hour of getting served, Kathy started contacting me. I left her hanging for a few hours before I answered as I didn't want to talk to her. I used the time to inform our kids and my family so they wouldn't be blindsided. So that was smart. You always want to get out in front of these kind of situations and make sure you're the one telling the story and not the cheater. When I finally spoke to Kathy, she was very upset and apologetic. I think she realized right away there was no coming back from this, but she still tried like hell to save our marriage. For the next week, we talked for hours by phone, and she must have sent me 100 texts. I probably shouldn't have given her so much access to me. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Why are you talking so much with her? But it was better than meeting her in person, he says. Every conversation we had ended with her begging and crying, saying and telling me she'd never cheated before and would never do it again. She offered to give me anything I wanted and sign anything I put in front of her if I'd promised to stay with her. It was a very emotional time for her and I, and a real depressing time for me. I swear I was on the verge of a heart attack back then, but thankfully the Lord saw me through it without any health problems. Her emotional state made the proceedings difficult, as all she kept telling everyone was, "I want my husband. I just want my husband back." Eventually, with the assistance of her parents and my kids, she voluntarily signed the divorce agreement. Because we were married so long, there was an equal distribution of our assets. She offered to turn over her portion to me, but I refused. I don't care about the money, I just wanted to get things over with and done with. She didn't handle the divorce well, and for a while there we were all worried about her. Well, that's her fault. Thankfully, she seems to be getting back to her old self now, but makes it clear to everyone how regretful and ashamed she is and that she'd do anything to get me back. A few months after our divorce, we sold the house and I bought a new townhouse condo. Kathy initially moved into a small apartment, but just recently moved into a new complex just a few miles down the road from my place. Well, that's not good because she's going to be near you, she's going to continue to try to creep back into your life, and she's going to be watching your every move. We still text multiple times a month, primarily about our kids and grandchild. In spite of everything, I still have love for her, but it's more in a parental way now. It's like I have a third child and I still find myself worrying about her well-being. Well, why are you doing that? You're divorced from her now. I'm in a new relationship now and things are getting serious with us. I picture myself marrying this woman in a few years and having at least one child with her. I'd like for Kathy to find her way before I did that. So this guy jumped right back into a serious relationship. Now listen, there's nothing wrong with him going on and establishing a new relationship. That's perfectly fine. But talking seriously like this and talking about getting married and having kids, this guy's jumping the gun. I initially thought she might end up with AP, but after their affair was uncovered, she's cut all ties with him. Now she doesn't even want anything to do with the AP. How does any of that make sense? Shortly thereafter, he moved back to Florida and now lives with one of his kids. My boss and my friends have repeatedly told me I'm crazy to worry about my ex, but I feel differently. Well, I agree with your boss and your friends. I'm over what she did and I forgive her. I've moved on and I have a new love in my life. Well, that's good that he's moved on and he's forgiven her in a way that, he can now act with indifference. That's what you want to get to. But the whole idea of him still being concerned about her welfare and well being and looking upon her as almost like a third child, he shouldn't be doing that. All that said, I spent nearly 27 years with Kathy, so I can't just throw her away like she never existed. Well, she did that to you when she hooked up with her old boyfriend. I want to see us both go on to build new relationships and live happy lives. And that's the end of his story. Now, overall, I think this guy handled the situation appropriately when he found out that she was cheating. He found out during the holiday season, all his kids were there and his grandchild was there. So he didn't want to ruin Christmas. So he said, I'm going to wait and address this after the first of the year. Nothing wrong with doing that. And then he even gave her a chance to course correct. He said, hey, if she doesn't follow up with this guy again, he might have just forgotten about this, kind of rug swept it. And that's something that you never do. So I disagree with him there. But of course, she didn't do that. She followed up with the AP and continued the affair. And then he took immediate action. So I applaud him for that. He handled everything there, I think, very well. But where I think he's going wrong here are 2 points. And I made that clear throughout the story. Number one, he's still in close contact with his ex-wife. Now, there's nothing wrong with remaining on friendly terms when you run into her. But this contacting her all the time and being in communication throughout the month, if you're talking about emergency situations regarding your kids or very important things, there's nothing wrong with that. But having this ongoing conversation with her, I think he needs to cut that off. And the second area where I think he might be making a mistake is where he's jumping back into this serious relationship after just a couple of years since he divorced his wife? Less than that. I think that's putting the cart before the horse and he needs to slow things down there. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to take a look at what I think are the morals of the story. The first one, be mindful of first love. A woman's first love imprints on her, and she's always going to have a soft spot for that guy in her heart. Now, with most women, it's not going to become an issue in your relationship. But with women who have a predisposition to cheating, it could be a major risk. Next. Be very cautious being her rebound guy. And that's what this guy was to Kathy. Because with Kathy, I think her first choice was AP. The guy that got away, the guy that went off to Florida and got another woman pregnant. But since he was out of the picture, she was off at college. She meets the OP, the guy telling the story, and she says, you know what, I'll make do with this guy. Now, if you ever find yourself in a relationship like that, all I'm saying is be very cautious about it. Next, don't morph into a father figure for your partner. I've said this on multiple videos and I'll keep saying it as long as it keeps coming up. You can see he did that throughout this video. When she was younger, she was probably going behind her father's back to meet up with this guy that she was dating back then. And look what she did to her husband. She was going behind his back to hook up with this guy. So again, don't become a father figure for your partner. And he even admits that at the end of the story. He said, now I look at her almost as a third child. I'm worried about her well-being and her welfare. You don't want to do that, guys. Next, stay calm, take control, and plan your steps. In most cases, a guy's initial reaction is to go and confront his girlfriend or his wife if they've been cheating on him. It's just human nature to do that. But by doing that, you give her the opportunity to go underground, to make up stories, and also potentially to make up something claiming you did something when you really didn't. So you want to be very cautious about that. Don't overreact. Don't jump the gun. Step back. Let things play out. Get your ducks in order. Go out and see an attorney and then confront her. Next, move on and start the next chapter of your life. And that's what this guy, I think, needs to do. Again, there's nothing wrong with being cordial with your ex. You've got children together, you got grandchildren together. If you're at family functions and so forth and you run into them, be cordial and that's it. Move on. If there's something important in life or an emergency that comes up, of course you're going to talk to them in those situations. But outside of that, you should be moving on and kind of cutting them out of your life. And finally, be cautious with rebound relationships. The second point above, I said be very cautious being her rebound guy. Now I'm telling this guy, be very cautious with this new love interest that you have. I think you're moving too fast, so just slow it down. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think this guy handled the situation? Would you have handled things like he did, or would you have done something completely different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you on the next